Dominance is often misunderstood as aggression, control, or loud authority, but in reality, the psychology of dominance is far more subtle, far more strategic, and far more rooted in perception than most people realize. Because true dominance is not about forcing others to submit. It's about shaping how others perceive your presence, your certainty, and your control over yourself and the environment. And this begins with a fundamental principle in human behavior, which is that people are constantly, often unconsciously, assessing status, not in a formal hierarchy sense, but in terms of who appears more certain, more composed, and more in control in any given interaction. And these assessments happen quickly, automatically, and are heavily influenced by nonverbal signals such as posture, eye contact, tone of voice, and timing, because the brain is wired to detect stability and instability, and it tends to assign higher status to those who appear stable under pressure. And this is why dominance is less about what you say and more about how you carry yourself while saying it. Because when someone speaks with calmness, takes their time, and doesn't rush to fill silence, it signals that they are not seeking approval or reacting to pressure, and that alone creates a perception of authority. And one of the most important aspects of dominance is emotional control, because the person who reacts less in a situation often holds more power, since reacting implies being influenced, while staying composed implies control. And this is why in conflicts, negotiations, or high-stakes conversations, the individual who remains calm, measured, and deliberate often ends up influencing the direction of the interaction more than the one who is more expressive or reactive. And this ties into a deeper psychological mechanism where humans associate control over emotion with strength, because it signals that the person is not easily destabilized, and therefore more reliable and more dominant in the social dynamic. And another key factor in dominance is certainty, not necessarily in being right, but in appearing grounded in your position, because people are naturally drawn to those who seem sure of themselves, since certainty reduces ambiguity, and the brain prefers clarity over uncertainty. So when someone communicates with hesitation, over-explains, or constantly seeks validation, it can reduce their perceived dominance, not because their ideas lack value, but because the delivery signals doubt. And in contrast, when someone communicates with clarity, pauses intentionally, and doesn't rush to justify themselves, it creates an impression of confidence that others respond to. And this is where timing becomes critical, because dominant individuals often control the pace of interactions. They don't rush their words, they allow silence to exist, and they use pauses strategically. And these pauses create space. And in that space, attention increases, tension builds, and their words carry more weight. And this is why silence can be a powerful tool in dominance, because it forces others to adjust to your pace rather than you adjusting to theirs. And this shift in control, even if subtle, changes the entire dynamic of the interaction. And beyond individual behavior, dominance is also shaped by how others respond to you, creating a feedback loop where your signals influence their behavior, and their behavior reinforces your position. So if you consistently present yourself with calm authority, others are more likely to listen, to wait for your response, and to defer to your presence. And over time, this becomes the expected dynamic. And this is why dominance is not established in a single moment, but reinforced through consistent patterns of behavior. And another important aspect is boundaries, because dominant individuals are often clear about what they accept and what they don't, and they communicate this not necessarily through confrontation, but through subtle signals such as not over-explaining, not tolerating constant interruption, and not seeking approval for their position. And these boundaries signal self-respect, and people tend to mirror that level of respect in how they treat you. And this connects to a broader principle in psychology, which is that people don't just respond to what you say, they respond to what you tolerate. And what you tolerate sets the standard for how you are treated. And then there is the role of presence, which is the ability to remain fully engaged in the moment without appearing distracted, rushed, or uncertain. And presence amplifies all other signals of dominance, because it makes your behavior feel intentional rather than reactive. And when someone is fully present, maintaining steady eye contact, using controlled movements, and speaking with clarity, it creates a sense of groundedness that others can feel, even if they can't explain it. And this is why dominance often feels quiet rather than loud, calm rather than intense, and controlled rather than forceful, and this distinction is important because many people attempt to appear dominant by increasing volume, intensity, or aggression, but these behaviors often signal insecurity rather than strength, because they reveal a need to assert control rather than naturally hold it. And true dominance does not need to announce itself. It is recognized through consistency, composure, and clarity, and another layer to this is social awareness. Because dominant individuals are often highly attuned to the dynamics of the interaction. They observe how others behave, how they respond, and they adjust their approach accordingly, not in a reactive way, but in a strategic way that maintains their position while keeping the interaction smooth. And this ability to read and influence social dynamics is what separates surface-level confidence from deeper psychological dominance. And then there is the concept of perceived independence. Because people who appear less dependent on external validation or approval are often perceived as more dominant, since their behavior suggests that they are guided by internal standards rather than external reactions. And this independence creates a sense of stability that others respect and often gravitate toward. And ultimately, the psychology of dominance comes down to a combination of signals that communicate control, certainty, and presence, not through force, but through consistency. Because when your behavior consistently reflects these qualities, people begin to adjust to your presence, to listen more, to interrupt less, and to take your words more seriously. And this shift happens gradually but powerfully. And once you understand that dominance is not about overpowering others, but about mastering your own behavior and signals, you realize that it is something that can be developed, refined, and applied in any interaction. And once you see how these subtle dynamics shape how people perceive and respond to you, you begin to notice them everywhere, in conversations, in leadership, in everyday interactions, and once you understand how dominance actually works, you can't unsee it.